Hi, my name is Jeric Yurkanin. Welcome to our Ancient Echoes podcast. I hope you're having a good day. We're going to continue on with our salvation series, part 2. And the title is If Salvation Isn't Clear, What is Christianity actually selling? So in part 1, we established something most churches avoid saying out loud. The Bible never guarantees heaven based on belief alone. In part 2, we are going to go deeper. So we are aware that modern day Christianity follows Apostle Paul far more than they follow Jesus. Now we arrive at this final question. If salvation isn't clearly guaranteed, if Jesus and Paul aren't saying the same thing, if the Bible contradicts itself on the most important issue imaginable, which is salvation, right? What is Christianity actually selling? Why are pastors so confident when the text itself isn't? To answer that question, we need to walk through the exact rebuttals pastors use when these contradictions rise. Not strawmen, the real explanations people hear from the pulpits. Jesus meant obedience as evidence, not requirement. This is probably the most common rebuttal. When someone points out Matthew 19:17, it says, if you want to enter life, keep the commandments. Pastors respond with something like that. Jesus isn't saying obedience earns salvation. He's saying obedience proves faith. That sounds reasonable, but it doesn't actually come from the text. Jesus doesn't say keep the commandments to show you're saved. He says if you want to enter life, keep the commandments. So again, Jesus is going back to the law, the Torah, the 10 Commandments. He never did away with it. That's cause and effect. The pastor's explanation doesn't clarify Jesus' words. It replaces him. And we see that today often. And that's why we mostly have a Pauline Christianity. We don't have Christianity, we have Pauline religion. And remember, Jesus was talking to the Jews under the law at the time. And the other popular rebuttal is when Jesus talks about obedience, pastors say that was before the cross, that was under the law. That doesn't apply today, but here's the problem. Jesus never says this only applies temporarily. This will change after my death. This will be replaced by belief alone. In fact, Jesus says the opposite. Matthew 5:17. Do not think I came to abolish the law. If pastors are right, Jesus didn't just fail to explain salvation clearly. He actively misled his audience. If they are right, that's not a small issue. Now, Apostle Paul claims to explain what Jesus meant. This rebuttal is rarely said out loud, but it's implied constantly. When Jesus and Paul don't match, pastors say Paul is clarifying Jesus. Paul is explaining the gospel. Paul gives us the full picture. But think about what that means. It means Jesus, the central figure of Christianity, wasn't clear enough on salvation, and Paul had to correct or reinterpret him. That places Paul above Jesus as theological authority. And yet Christianity insists Jesus is Lord. That hierarchy doesn't hold. Let's look at Matthew 25 again. Jesus separates people based on action, feeding the hungry, welcoming the stranger, caring for the sick. No belief test, no confession, no doctrine quiz. Pastors respond, these works didn't save them. They were already saved. But Jesus never says that. That explanation isn't drawn from the passage, it is imported into it, a paraphrase. And that matters because if you have to add theology to make Jesus fit your system, well, do we really have Jesus? And then your system isn't coming from Jesus. Like Hebrews 10:26 comes up. If we deliberately keep on sinning, no sacrifice for sins remains. Pastors say, oh, it's just a warning. It's hypothetical. It's about rewards, not salvation. But the text never says it talks about judgment. Let me go back there. It talks about judgment, fear, or consequences. That's what it talks about. If warning have no real consequences, they're meaningless. And if willful sin doesn't matter, Hebrews shouldn't exist. They say the Sabbath was fulfilled in Christ. Let's revisit the Sabbath, one of the Ten Commandments, repeated constantly in the Old Testament. Never revoked explicitly by Jesus. Pastors say Jesus fulfilled the Sabbath. But here's the issue. Fulfilled doesn't mean optional, unless pastors decide it does. The same logic is never applied consistently. Sabbath becomes symbolic. Sexual rules stay literal. Wealth warnings get softened. But gender rules stay firm. It's not ironic. That's not biblical interpretation. That's cultural negotiation. Jesus' money teaching are about the heart. That's what we hear, right? But when Jesus says, Matthew 6:24, you cannot serve God and money, pastors respond, it's about attitude, it's about priorities. You can be rich and faithful. Jesus doesn't say that. He says cannot, not should not be careful. But he said cannot. And when pastors soften this, it reveals something important. Jesus' teachings are acceptable only when they don't threaten wealth. And I'm sure we agree with that. Why every rebuttal matters and why every rebuttal does the same thing. Every single pastoral rebuttal does one thing. It removes tension. It removes ambiguity. It removes discomfort. It removes fear. It restores certainty. But the Bible itself doesn't offer that certainty. The certainty is added after the fact. So what is Christianity actually selling? Christianity isn't selling clarity. It's selling assurance. Assurance that you're okay, you belong, you're safe, you don't need to wrestle with contradictions. That assurance keeps people calm. Calm people don't question. Calm people keep institutions stable, and they keep returning. So the final question is, if salvation were truly clear, pastors wouldn't need this many explanations. Jesus wouldn't sound harsher than Paul. The Bible wouldn't contradict itself. Certainty wouldn't need defending. The fact that it does tell us something important. Christianity didn't remove fear. It repackaged it. So we're going to wrap this up in a moment. So the Bible doesn't offer clean answers on salvation. Jesus demands obedience, sacrifice, and endurance. Paul offers belief, grace, and assurance. Pastors smooth the difference. Churches pick the version that scales. And believers are told it's all the same. But it isn't. Maybe the most honest conclusion isn't certainty at all. Maybe it is this. If salvation depends on interpretation, then no one actually knows. And pretending otherwise may be the biggest act of faith Christianity asks for. So, my name is Jeric Yurkanin. I'm your host of the Ancient Echoes podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you like our work, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please click on our Facebook post and like our Facebook page. Till next time, hope you have a good day.